Homework 22 is going to be finally getting to slope. We talked about slope on homework 20 when we did all that graphing. When I think of slope, I like to think of a hill. If I'm going uphill as I go from left to right, I'm going up the hill, my slope should be positive. If I'm going downhill as I go from left to right, my slope is going to end up being negative. So, to find the slope, there are a couple things you can do. One way is if I have the graph, I can just basically count. Slope, they say, is rise over run. I don't really particularly care for the word rise, because to me rise always means you go up, but it's really the change in your y-axis. So the rise means I could go up, but I could also go down if I have a negative number. My run is the left or right. Left if it's positive, right, or left if it's negative, right if it's positive. So I could just count from this dot to this dot to find my slope. I am going to go 1, 2, 3 down, so -3 would be my top number, and then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right, so 6 would be my bottom number, so my slope would be -1/2. Now what they're going to have you do is practice using the formula on ones that you can count the slope out on, just to make sure you're doing the formula right. So my formula for slope, the symbol for slope is m, and they're going to say I'm going to take the y value from point 2 minus the y value from point 1 divided by the x value from point 2 minus the x value from point 1. Now it really doesn't matter which one is point 1 and point 2, but since I read from left to right, I like to call the one on the left my point 1 and the one on my right my point 2. So coordinates of this point would be -2, 2. I'm going to call that my x value from point 1 and my y value from point 1. Coordinates of this point, 4, -1. So that's my x value from point 2 and my y value from point 2. So in my formula, I'm taking the y value from point 2, I'm subtracting the y value from point 1. So I'm going to take -1 and I'm going to subtract the 2. -1 minus the 2. If I do that, you can see I get -3. -3 is the value I got when I counted from here to here. I went down 3 places. My x value from point 2, which is 4, minus my x value from point 1, which is -2. So I'm going to have 4, I'm going to subtract a -2, and whenever I end up subtracting a negative, I end up adding. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 is the value I got when I counted. I went down 3 and 6 to the right. So I can see, oh, yep, I worked out my formula correctly. Of course, I always want my fractions in simplified form, so -1/2 would be the slope of this line. What it really means is if I went down 1 and over 2, I should touch the line. I do. Down 1 and over 2, I touch the line. Down 1 and over 2, I touch the line. So you can see I could add a whole bunch of extra dots in there doing my slope. So they're going to have you practice using the formula. I'm going to say count it to make sure you did the formula correctly. So on number 2, if I'm going to find the slope of my line using my formula, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. First thing I have to do is name my 2 points. So this first point is at -3, 1. It's going to be my x1 and my y1. This point over here on the right is going to be at 2, 4. That's my x2 and my y2. So on the top is the change in the y. The y value from point 2 is 4. I'm going to subtract the y value from point 1, which is 1. 4 minus 1 means I'm going to have 3. Doing my x's. The x value from point 2 is 2. I'm going to subtract my x value from point 1, which is a -3. Again, I'm subtracting a negative, so when I subtract a negative, I end up adding. 2 minus a negative 3 is 5. So if I'm starting here and I'm going here, it means I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over, and sure enough, that's what I do. Up 3 and over 5. There's my slope. Number 3 then, using my formula, m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Coordinates of this point here, going to be at negative 4, positive 3. Coordinates of this point would be at positive 1, negative 4. So I'm going to start my y value from point 2, which is negative 4. I'm going to subtract the y value from point 1, which is 3. Negative 4 minus 3 would give me negative 7. Then I'm going to do on the bottom, the x value from point 2 is 1. I'm going to subtract the x value from point 1, which happens to be a negative 4. Again, I'm subtracting a negative, so I end up adding. And so I get negative 7/5. So what that's telling me is if I start at the point on the left, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So I went down 7 and over 5, so my slope was negative 7/5. Four, 5, and 6, now that we've practiced using the formula for slope where we had the graphs and we could count to check out our problem, now they're just going to give you the 2 points and have you practice using the formula. So again, the formula for slope, the y value from point 2 minus the y value from point 1 over the x value from point 2 minus the x value from point 1. And again, it really doesn't matter which one is point 1 and point 2. I'm just going to say this one is point 1 and this one is point 2. So I'm going to take the y value from point 2, which is negative 7. I'm going to subtract the y value from point 1, which is 6. Negative 7 minus 6 then gives me negative 13. On the bottom, starting with the x value from point 2, which is 4, I'm going to subtract the x value from point 1, which is a negative 6. Again, I'm subtracting a negative. It's going to be a positive. 4 plus 6 is 10. So my slope is negative 13/10. So finding the slope of the line that passes through the point negative 2, negative 7, and 3, 5. First of all, my formula, I'm doing the change in y over the change in my x's. So point 1 and point 2. The y value from point 2, which is 5, subtracting the y value from point 1, which is negative 7. Subtracting a negative, I end up adding. So 5 minus a negative 7 would give me 12. On the bottom, x value from point 2 is 3. I'm going to subtract the x value from point 1, which is negative 2. Again, I'm subtracting a negative. 3 minus a negative 2 is 3 plus 2, so I get 5. So 12/5 would be my slope. And so on the third one, again, I'm going to find my slope. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Here's my point 1. Here's my point 2. So the y value from point 2, negative 6. I'm going to subtract the y value from point 1, which is a 7. Negative 6 minus 7 is negative 13. On the bottom, x value from point 2 is the 2. I'm going to subtract the x value from point 1, which is a negative 3. Again, they gave me that subtracting a negative. 2 minus a negative 3 would be 2 plus 3, which is 5. So negative 13/5 is my slope. So 7, 8, and 9, they just want to see if you understand what slope is. And so they're going to graph a line with a given slope passing through a given point. So I'm going to graph the line with the slope of 3 that passes through the point 2, negative 1. First thing I'm going to do is plot that point that they give me. So 2, negative 1 would be over 2, down 1. There's my starting point. I'm then going to use my slope to find some more points so I can draw my line. So if my slope is 3, I have to write it as a fraction. I can either write it as 3 over 1 or a negative 3 over a negative 1, because a negative divided by a negative is still a positive slope. The top number is the change in the y, so it's going to tell you the up or the down. So the top number here means I'm going to go 3 up. Here, if it's negative, I would go 3 down. My bottom number is the change in the x, the left or the right. So we're given if it's positive, I'm going to go to the right. If it's negative, I'm going to go to the left. So from the point that you have marked, you can either go up 3 and to the right 1. Up 1, 2, 3 and to the right 1. I could keep going up 1, 2, 3 and to the right 1 and so forth. Or I could have gone down 3 and to the left 1. Down 1, 2, 3 and to the left 1. Down 1, 2, 3 and to the left 1. Notice all of those dots still line up. My slope is positive, so as I go from left to right, I should be going uphill, which I am, and there's my line. So number 8, same kind of thing. I'm going to start by plotting my point that they give me. So my starting point is at negative 4, positive 3. My slope is 3/4. That one is already a fraction. You could use it as a positive 3 over a positive 4, or if you wanted to, a negative 3 over a negative 4. So either you're going to go up 3 and to the right 4, or down 3 and to the left 4. So from the point we have marked, up 1, 2, 3 and over 1, 2, 3, 4. Up 1, 2, 3 and over 1, 2, 3, 4. I could have also gone down 1, 2, 3 and over 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to run off my graph. Again, I really only need 2 points to make my line, but my line's going to look something like that. My slope is positive. I'm going uphill as I go from left to right. Number 9, this time we are going to graph a line with a slope of negative 1 and passing through the point 3, negative 2. So again, we're going to start by plotting our point. 3, negative 2 would be right there, over 3 and down 2. My slope is negative 1. So I can either have a negative 1 over a positive 1, or the opposite way around, a positive over a negative, right? Positive 1 divided by negative 1 is still negative 1. So I could go down and to the right, or up and to the left. So down 1 and to the right 1, down 1 and to the right 1, or up 1 and to the left 1, up 1 and to the left 1. My slope is negative, so as I connect those dots, I should be going downhill as I go from left to right, and sure enough I am. (10, 11, 12) now are going to have you find the slope and the y-intercept of my line, so that if I want to graph it using the slope and the y-intercept instead of the x and the y-intercept, I can. So first of all, if I'm going to put it in to find the slope and the y-intercept, I'm going to rearrange my equation and solve it for y. Y equals mx plus b is called slope-intercept form of my equation. The m is the symbol for slope. The B is going to be your y-intercept. So on this first part, we're just going to rearrange it, solve it for y, so that we can pick out our y-intercept and our slope. They do like to switch those around, so make sure you're paying attention when you enter your answers in. So if I'm going to solve this for y, I need to move my 6x to the other side, and when I do that, it's going to become a negative 6x. Because in my slope-intercept form, I want the x first, I'm going to write it first. So I'm going to have 3y equals negative 6x minus 3. When I took my 6x and moved it over, it became negative 6x. Now I still need to get rid of my coefficient because I'm not solved for y, so now I'm going to divide everything by 3 and simplify. So y is going to equal negative 2x minus 1. So in the slope-intercept form of the equation, the end number is your y-intercept. Your y-intercept is negative 1. The number in front of the x is the slope. So my slope is the negative 2. So number 11, same kind of thing. I want to find my y-intercept and my slope. So I need to solve it for y. The negative 5y then is going to equal, if I move my 4x to the other side, it's going to become a minus 4x. So negative 4x plus 2. The sign on my 2 isn't going to change since it was already over there. Still need to divide by my negative 5. So y is going to equal. Here I have a negative over a negative, so it's going to be a positive. I can't simplify it, so it's just going to be 4/5 x. Here I have a positive over a negative, so it's going to be negative 2/5 then. So again, once I have it in my slope-intercept form, the end number is my y-intercept. So the negative 2/5, make sure you include that sign. My slope is the number in front of the x, so my slope is going to be 4/5. Number 12, again on this one, I'm not quite in standard form. I'm going to make sure I'm in standard form before I start, so I'm going to move my 1 over to the other side. So I'm going to have 3x plus 5y equals negative 1. Now I really could have moved my x at the same time because I want to get the y by itself. So 5y is going to equal negative 3x minus 1. Dividing by my 5 then, y is going to equal negative 3/5 x minus 1/5. Now that I have it solved for y, my y-intercept is the number on the end, so the negative 1/5. My slope, the number in front of the x, so the negative 3/5. 13, 14, and 15, they're now going to use that concept of finding the slope and the y-intercept so that you can graph your line. So again, my first step is just to rearrange my equation and solve it for y so that I can pick out my slope and my y-intercept. So negative 3y is going to equal, this will go over here and become positive 9x, so 9x plus 3. Dividing by my negative 3. Y is going to equal, 9 divided by negative 3 would give me negative 3x. 3 divided by negative 3 is minus 1. You'll notice on this one they asked for the slope first and then the y-intercept. So my slope is the negative 3, my y-intercept is the negative 1. Once I found my slope and my y-intercept, I can go ahead and graph. My y-intercept is at negative 1, so I'm going to go ahead and plot negative 1 on my y-axis. My slope is negative 3. I usually just leave the top positive, or the top negative, and put the bottom as a positive 1. I could do it as 3 over negative 1 if I wanted to. So I'm going to go down 3 and to the right 1. Down 1, 2, 3 and to the right 1. Down 1, 2, 3 and to the right 1. I could have also gone up 3 and to the left 1. Up 1, 2, 3 and to the left 1. Again, since my slope is negative, I should be going downhill as I connect those dots from left to right. Number 14, hey, they made this one easier to solve. I just need to move my x to the other side, so I'm going to add the 4x. Y then equals 4x plus 1. Don't have a coefficient other than 1 in front of my y, so I'm good. Again, my slope is the number in front of the x, so my slope is 4. My y-intercept is the number on the end, so the 1. So my y-intercept is at positive 1. I'm going to go ahead and mark that on my y-axis. My slope is 4, so I'm going to do 4 over 1. So up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. I could have also done negative over a negative, which would make it positive. So down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and to the left 1. And again, as I connect my dots from left to right, my line should be going uphill because my slope was positive. Number 15, same kind of thing. I want to find the slope and the y-intercept of my line, so I'm going to go ahead and solve it for y. Moving my x to the other side, it's going to become a negative 4x. So 5y equals negative 4x plus 10. I then have to divide by my 5. So y is going to equal negative 4/5 x plus 2. 10 divided by 5. So my slope, negative 4/5. My y-intercept going to be positive 2. So on my y-axis, I'm going to mark 2 for my y-intercept. My slope is negative 4/5. I like to usually just put the negative on the top. So I'm going to go down 4 and to the right 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. Technically, you really only need 2 points to make your line. And again, since my slope was negative, I should be going downhill as I connect those dots from left to right. (16, 17, and 18), they are now going to have us write the equation for the line, and they're going to have us write it in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form was that y equals mx plus b, the m being the slope, and the b being the y-intercept. So we want to write the equation of the line that passes through the point negative 6, 5 and has a slope of negative 2. That means we know right away that m is going to be negative 2, so we're going to plug it in here and say y equals negative 2x plus some number b. So what I need to do is find out what the y-intercept is by using this point that has to go through my line. So I'm going to put this in for x and this in for y. So I am going to put 5 in for my y, negative 6 in for my x. So 5 is going to equal negative 2 times negative 6, which is 12. And then now I can have an equation where I can solve that for b. So if I want to solve this for b, all I need to do is subtract my 12. 5 minus 12 would be negative 7 for my b value. So now I'm going to write the equation of my line, putting negative 2 in for my slope, putting the minus 7 in for my y-intercept. So y is going to equal negative 2x minus 7. Keep in mind that you're not going to do plus a negative. A positive times a negative just stays negative. So this is going to be the form of my line. If it's a minus, I'm just going to put minus 7, not plus a negative 7. So y equals negative 2x minus 7. So in number 17, this time it says my line has a slope of negative 6. So I know m is negative 6. Goes through the point 1, 3. So if my slope is negative 6, again, I'm just going to put negative 6 in for the m. Y equals negative 6x plus some number b. That's going to be my y-intercept. And then I'm going to plug my numbers in. So the 1 is going in for the x. The 3 is going in for the y. So 3 is going to equal negative 6 times 1, which is still negative 6, plus b. To solve that for b, I'm just going to add my 6. 9 is then going to be my b value. So now that I know my slope is negative 6, my y-intercept is 9, I can write the equation y equals negative 6x. This is a positive 9, so plus 9. Y equals negative 6x plus 9. Number 18, same kind of thing. I want to write the equation of my line. I want to put it in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. This time it tells me that my slope is going to be negative 3/4. So y is going to equal negative 3/4 x plus some number b that I'm going to find. The line passes through the point 4, negative 6, so the 4 is my x, the negative 6 is my y. So negative 6 here, 4 here. So negative 6 is going to equal, I'm going to take negative 3/4 times 4, or 4 over 1. The 4's are going to cancel out, so I just get the negative 3. Again, if you're really bad with fractions, you could just use your calculator and take negative 3/4 times 4. Should get negative 3. I want to solve this for b, so I have to add my 3. Negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3 for my b value. So I knew my slope, my m value was negative 3/4. I found my b value was negative 3, so now I have to plug it into my equation. So y equals negative 3/4 x minus my 3. (19, 20, and 21), we're still going to write the equation of the line. This time they're going to give us the graph. So if we have the graph, it's pretty easy to do because all we need to do is be able to pick out my slope and pick out my y-intercept from looking at my graph. We know that we're going to have our equation in the form of y equals mx plus b, which is slope-intercept form. So my slope, remember, the top is the up or down, the change in the y, the bottom, the right or left. I always go to the right because I start on the left. So I can just always count my slope if I have my graph. 1, 2, 3, 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So 4 over 5 is going to be my slope. If you want to practice using the formula, you could use the formula, but since we have the graph, it's just as easy to count. 1, 2, 3, 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. It's positive because my line is going uphill. My y-intercept, where does my line touch the y-axis? Right there at negative 1. So once I found my slope and my y-intercept, just like on the previous ones, I just plug them in. Y is going to equal 4/5 x minus 1, and that is going to be the equation of my line. So number 20. Again, I want to write the equation of my line. I'm going to put it in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to pick out my slope, and I'm going to find my y-intercept. So my slope, starting on the left, I'm going to go 1, 2 down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So negative 2 over 5. Down 2 over 5. My y-intercept, I scribbled all over, but hopefully you can see that my y-intercept, where I'm touching the y-axis, is at 4. So the equation of that line would be y equals negative 2/5 x plus my 4. And last one here, I'm going to move that up a little bit. Number 21, I'm going to again write the equation of my line. I know I want it in slope-intercept form. So in the form of y equals mx plus b, my slope. I am going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down. So -7. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the right. So -7 over 7 gives me a slope of -1. My y-intercept. My y-intercept, notice that touches right in the middle at 0. So y would equal -1x plus 0. Now, of course, on that equation I can simplify it, and I can simplify it quite a bit because we really don't need the plus 0 on the end. So y equals -1x, and we don't need the 1 in front of the x. So y just equals -x, and that would be the best form for the equation of that line. Most of them you're not going to be able to simplify much, but here are the two cases. I don't need the 0 on the end, and if there's a 1 in front of my x, I don't need the 1.